The rain hit hard, sharp as glass, drenching the broken asphalt of the remote mountain road. The world felt silenced by the storm, except for the hum of a lone pickup truck crawling uphill, its headlights slashing through sheets of water. Inside, Eli Morgan, a mechanic and single father in his early 40s, gripped the steering wheel with one hand while checking his vibrating phone. A missed call from his son's school. Again. Damn it, he muttered. What now, Josh? He barely had enough gas to get home, let alone deal with another incident. But before frustration could boil over, he slammed the brakes. There, just ahead, was a silver Mercedes tilted at an awkward angle on a roadside shoulder, smoke curling from the hood, one tire completely shredded. Lightning cracked. Through the downpour, he saw someone inside, banging on the window. A girl. Trapped. Eli threw the truck in a park, yanked his jacket over his head, and ran. Water soaked him instantly, but he didn't hesitate. He reached the driver's side and knocked hard. The window slid down halfway. "Are you okay?" he shouted. The young woman inside looked barely 20. Her mascara was streaked down her cheeks, hair matted to her face, hands trembling as she pointed to the passenger side. "It won't open. I think I hit something. Please, I don't know what to do." "I got you," Eli said. He circled the car, yanked the stubborn door open, and helped her out. Her heels slipped on the muddy ground, but he caught her. She was cold, soaked, and clearly in shock. "What's your name?" he asked, voice steady. "Lena," she whispered, teeth chattering. "Lena Grant." Eli wrapped his coat around her. "Okay, Lena. You're safe now. I'm Eli. Let's get you somewhere warm." She blinked. "I don't even know where I am. You're lucky I was coming back from a job." He opened his truck door. "Climb in. I'll get you to my place. Just a few miles from here. We'll figure out the rest after you warm up." Lena hesitated, but the storm decided for her. She nodded and slid in. His place was a small fixer-upper cabin tucked behind pine trees, the kind of home people passed by without noticing. Inside, it smelled of sawdust and motor oil, but it was warm, dry, and filled with the faint sound of an old clock ticking in the hall. Eli gave Lena a blanket and brewed her tea while tossing his soaked shirt into the laundry. His son, Josh, peeked from the hallway in oversized pajamas, holding a half-built robot. "Who's that?" he whispered. "A guest," Eli said. "Be polite." Josh stepped forward. "Hi, I'm Josh. You look wet." Lena let out a weak laugh. "Yeah, just a bit." The atmosphere softened. Eli returned, handing her the tea. "There you go. That'll help." She sipped, breathing in the steam. "Thank you. You didn't have to stop, you know. Most people would have just driven past." "I'm not most people." She glanced around the modest cabin. Framed photos, old tools, worn-out cushions. There was no luxury here. Just honesty. Just struggle. Lena exhaled, long and slow. "My phone's dead. And I was actually running from something." Eli didn't pry. "You don't have to tell me anything. You're safe. That's enough for tonight." Her eyes glassed over. "You don't even know me. Why help?" "Because I've needed help before, too," he said softly. "And the people who helped me didn't ask questions." There it was. That quiet kind of kindness. The kind that expected nothing back. Hours later, Lena was asleep on the couch, wrapped in blankets. Josh had gone to bed. Eli sat on the porch, cigarette between his fingers, staring into the dark woods. He didn't know who she really was. Didn't know that back in the city, a private security team had been searching for her since dusk. Didn't know that Lena Grant was the only daughter of Victor Grant, the ruthless billionaire construction magnate who hadn't spoken to her in 6 months, until tonight. And Eli certainly didn't know that by morning, his quiet life would be shattered by the roar of a private black helicopter landing just 30 feet from his cabin. The helicopter blades sliced the morning air like thunder. Dust and pine needles whipped in every direction as the black aircraft descended into the clearing in front of Eli's cabin. Inside, coffee halfway to his lips, Eli froze. Josh stood wide-eyed at the window. "Dad, are we in trouble?" Eli rushed to the door, throwing it open just as Lena stumbled down the hallway, hair messy, eyes wide with confusion. "What the hell is that?" he yelled over the wind. But Lena's face told the story. She knew. 2 men in black suits emerged from the chopper, eyes scanning everything with precision. They moved like trained wolves, disciplined, alert, and dangerous. "Miss Grant," the older one called out, "your father sent us. We've located you." Lena stepped back. No, I'm not going with you." Eli stood in front of her. "Hey, you want to explain what the hell's going on before shouting orders at someone in my house?" The older man adjusted his earpiece. "Sir, I advise you to step aside. This is a private matter concerning Miss Lena Grant, the daughter of Victor Grant." Josh's jaw dropped. "Wait, she's the daughter of that Grant? The billionaire?" Eli turned slowly to Lena. "You didn't think to mention that?" "I didn't want to be found," Lena said softly, eyes brimming with tears. "I needed to get away." Eli looked between her and the men. "Well, she's not going anywhere until she wants to. That clear?" The younger guard stepped forward. "Sir, don't interfere." But Eli didn't move. That was when the third figure stepped out of the helicopter. Older, taller, commanding. His gray suit looked like it cost more than Eli's entire truck. Victor Grant. His presence sucked the air out of the forest. Lena backed up again. "Dad, you've had your rebellion," Victor said coldly. "Now, again the chopper." "No." Victor's jaw tensed. "You've embarrassed this family enough. Running off into the woods like some vagrant? And now you're in some shack with." He looked Eli up and down with disgust. "This?" Eli didn't flinch. "Careful. This shack kept your daughter alive in that storm." Victor ignored him. "You're coming home. End of story." Lena looked at Eli, then at Josh, then down at the blanket she was still clutching. She shook her head. "I'm not going. You didn't even know I was gone until your investors started calling. Did you? You don't want me back. You just want her image back." Victor's eyes narrowed. "If you don't come with me willingly, you'll regret it." Eli stepped between them again. "She's not property. She stays if she wants to stay. You really think you can stand in my way?" Victor's voice dipped into a threat. "I don't care who you are," Eli said quietly. "You don't storm into a man's home and start barking orders. You want to talk? We'll talk like men. But you're not dragging her out of here like she's nothing." Victor stared at him with a mix of disbelief and fury. No one ever talked to him like that. But Lena was watching Eli like he just turned gravity upside down. The standoff lasted another minute before Victor spoke into his calm. "Stand down. We'll return tomorrow." He turned to Lena, voice like a knife. "Think carefully, Lena, because next time I won't ask." Then he walked back to the helicopter. As the rotors kicked up again, Josh leaned toward his dad. "Are we going to get sued?" Eli exhaled slowly. "Maybe." After they were gone, silence settled over the house like a heavy fog. Lena sank into the chair. Her hands were shaking. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "For what?" Eli asked. "For bringing that here. For lying. For pretending to be someone I'm not." Eli shook his head. "You didn't lie. You just didn't tell me. There's a difference." Josh sat across from her. "You're a billionaire's daughter. Why'd you run?" Lena didn't answer right away. She stared at the chipped mug in her hand like it held the whole answer. "Because sometimes being rich means being trapped," she said at last. "And I couldn't breathe anymore. Everything was about power, about control, about being perfect. I wanted out." Josh tilted his head. "And you picked here?" She smiled faintly. "Didn't plan to, but I'm glad I did." That night, after Josh went to bed, Lena and Eli sat outside again. The storm was gone. Stars had returned. "I meant what I said," Eli told her. "You don't owe him anything unless you decide you do." "I don't know what to do," Lena said. "If I stay, he'll retaliate. If I go back, I disappear again." Eli nodded. "Then maybe it's time you stand your ground. Not just to him, but to everyone who's ever tried to define who you are." Her voice cracked. "You think I can do that? I've seen a lot in people. And trust me, Lena, you've got fire in you. Don't waste it trying to be something you're not." She looked at him for a long moment. "You don't even know me." "No," he said, "but I've met broken things before, and I know what it looks like when they start healing." But healing wouldn't come quietly, because Victor Grant had never been humiliated like this. And tomorrow, he'd come back with more than words. The next day broke under a cloudless sky, but the peace was a lie. Eli felt it in his bones. He worked in the yard while Josh fiddled with a drone made from scrap parts, and Lena stayed quiet, glued to her phone, unread messages voicemails, a dozen missed calls. All from Victor. She didn't return any of them. Maybe I should just leave, she said suddenly, before he does something worse. Eli, crouched near his truck's rusted axle, didn't look up. That's exactly what he wants. For you to be scared. Cornered. You don't know him. No, I don't, Eli said, tightening a bolt with force. But I know bullies, and they all act the same when someone stops being afraid of them. She said nothing. But later that afternoon, fear arrived in a sharp black BMW. Victor hadn't come this time, but his lawyer had. A young, smug man with perfect teeth and a tailored coat stepped out like he owned the dirt he stood on. He handed Eli a white envelope. This is a cease and desist, signed by Judge Colfax. You are to have no further contact or involvement with Ms. Grant. Any violation may result in prosecution, fines, or imprisonment. Eli read the letter without flinching. This ain't how you win her back, friend. The lawyer smirked. Winning her back isn't the goal. Control is. She's a liability out here. And you? You're the storm shelter she's clinging to. But she's his daughter, not yours. Not your responsibility. Lena stood on the porch, arms crossed, jaw tight. Tell my father if he wants to scare me. He'll have to try harder. The lawyer's grin widened. I'll make sure he hears that. He drove off, tires spitting gravel. That night, Lena didn't eat. She stared out the window, biting her nails, her shoulders tight with tension. You okay? Eli asked. No, she said honestly. He won't stop until he wins. Eli sat beside her. So don't let him. Her eyes burned. You make it sound simple, but you don't get it. He has power, connections, money, the kind that gets people fired, evicted, disappeared. Eli didn't flinch. Yeah, he's rich. So what? That doesn't make him right. He's got money, Lena, but he doesn't have you. Her hands trembled. He'll destroy you, Eli. You and Josh. Just to prove a point. Eli leaned forward, voice quiet but firm. Let him try. But the next morning, the real hit came. Eli's garage, the small, half-broken business he'd spent 6 years rebuilding, was shut down by county order. A city official stood awkwardly outside the chain-link fence with papers in hand. I'm sorry, Mr. Morgan. Someone filed a formal complaint. Code violations, permit issues. You're closed until further notice. Eli's heart fell into his stomach. You gotta be kidding me. I'm not. The officer said, apologetic. Orders from above. You've got a week to vacate. The moment the officer left, Eli drove straight home. Lena was on the porch. I'm sorry, she whispered before he even spoke. He slammed the truck door. This is how your father fights? By taking away the only thing I have left. Lena looked gutted. I'll go. I swear. I'll fix this. Eli shook his head. He won't stop, Lena. You leaving won't save me. It'll just mean he wins again. But you don't deserve this. No one deserves it, he snapped. But life doesn't hand you what you deserve. You fight for it. And you know what? I'm tired of being scared of men like him. That night, after Josh went to sleep, Eli pulled out a box from the closet. Inside were court papers, child support arguments, photos from his custody battle with his ex-wife. Lena sat nearby, silent. I lost everything once, Eli said, voice heavy. The house, my tools, even time with Josh. And I earned every bit of it back with my hands. No favors. No shortcuts. He looked up. I'm not losing it again. Lena swallowed. Then what do we do? Eli stared at her. We show him what real strength looks like. Not the kind you buy. The kind you bleed for. She blinked at him. Why are you helping me? Because someone's got to break the cycle. And maybe it starts with you. That week, Eli wrote a letter. Not to a judge. Not to a lawyer. To the media. And in it, he laid out the full story. How a billionaire had tried to forcefully reclaim his daughter. How a mechanic's garage had been shut down without warning. How silence had become a weapon. He sent it to 5 news stations, 3 blogs, and 1 podcast. He never expected anyone to care. But 3 days later, his phone wouldn't stop ringing. A national talk show host picked it up. Then a major YouTuber. The hashtag Let Lena Live exploded. Suddenly, reporters were driving up his dirt road. Microphones appeared at his door. And the man who'd lived most of his life invisible was now at the center of a media firestorm. Victor Grant couldn't silence the world this time. And Lena? She stood next to Eli on the porch one morning, watching the news play on a cameraman screen. Her father's face appeared, tight-lipped, furious, defensive. Her voice cracked. I never thought anyone would believe me, let alone fight for me. Eli looked down at her. Then believe it. You're not just a pawn anymore, Lena. You're the one flipping the board. But the game wasn't over. Because billionaires don't lose quietly. And Victor still had one card left to play. The media chaos had turned Eli's quiet mountain home into a circus. News vans parked along the gravel road. Drones buzzed overhead. Strangers drove hours just to leave messages on Eli's fence, thanking him for protecting a girl they didn't know but suddenly cared about. The story had struck a nerve. It wasn't just about Lena anymore. It was about control, about power, about a father who treated love like ownership, and a stranger who chose kindness over fear. But Eli knew better than to relax. Victor Grant wasn't done. Late one night, after the last reporter drove off, Eli sat outside with Lena under the porch light. Josh was asleep. The air was cold, stars blinking overhead, quiet enough to hear every heartbeat. I don't know what happens next, Lena said. What if he ruins you? For good. Eli didn't answer right away. Then, maybe he can take everything. But he can't take who I am. She looked down. I used to think love was control. Because that's what he taught me. That if someone didn't obey you, they didn't care. But you show me something different. Eli exhaled. Sometimes the most powerful thing a person can do is nothing. Just sit beside someone who's breaking and not try to fix them. Just be there. She looked at him, her voice trembling. You were there. And for the first time, Lena leaned in and rested her head against his shoulder. She didn't cry. She didn't speak. But her silence said everything. The next morning, Victor played his final hand. He filed a lawsuit in federal court accusing Eli of harboring and manipulating his daughter. He claimed Lena was mentally vulnerable, that Eli was a threat to her safety and well-being. It was a disgusting, calculated move. And it worked at first. Within hours, public opinion started to shift. Some began to ask if Eli had other motives, if he was seeking fame, if the kind mechanic had a darker side. Eli felt it instantly, the cold turning of the tide. Even his bank account was frozen. Lena was livid. He's trying to isolate you. Turn the story upside down. I have to go back and stop this. No, Eli said. That's what he wants. You disappear, I fall apart. And he walks away clean. But you'll lose everything. He shook his head. If you give up now, we both lose. That night, Lena disappeared. Eli woke to her note on the kitchen counter. I love you both. But this is my fight now. Don't come after me. Victor Grant didn't expect what happened next. The next morning, Lena walked straight into the headquarters of Grant Global Enterprises, past security, and into the boardroom mid-meeting. She wore no makeup, no designer clothes. Just herself. Get out, Victor hissed, shocked. You don't belong here. But Lena reached into her bag and pulled out the original trust document from her late mother's lawyer. They'd been forgotten, hidden, but not destroyed. I'm the majority beneficiary of Mom's trust, Lena said, voice shaking but loud. And that trust owns 37% of Grant Global, which means, starting today, I'm your largest voting shareholder. Gasps filled the room. Victor's face went pale. And since we're discussing what people deserve, I filed a motion to remove you as CEO. Effective immediately. Back in the mountains, Eli was fixing the gutter when he heard it, tires on gravel. He turned. A sleek black car. Out stepped Lena. But this time, not as a runaway. Not as a scared girl. As a woman in full control. She walked straight to Eli, eyes shining. It's over. He can't touch you anymore. He dropped the wrench. What did you do? I took back what he stole from me. And then I gave him the one thing he fears most. What's that? My silence. She stepped forward and pulled him into a hug, so tight it knocked the wind out of him. Then, slowly, she looked up at him. Eli, I want to rebuild something real. Not in a mansion. Not on a magazine cover. Here. With you. With Josh. He stared at her, eyes wide, heart pounding. You sure? Lena smiled. I've never been more sure of anything. 6 months later, the garage was open again, better than ever. Donations from supporters across the country had poured in after Lena's boardroom showdown went viral. Eli turned down most of them, choosing to rebuild slowly with dignity. Lena stayed, not just in the house, but in their lives. She helped Josh with homework, learned how to change tires. She even started a nonprofit to help runaways and emotionally abused kids find real shelter, real kindness. She called it the Morgan Project. When asked why, she told reporters, "Because a stranger gave me a second chance without asking for anything in return. And that saved me." Victor Grant vanished from the media, disgraced, stripped of power, forgotten. But Eli never gloated. He just kept living, kept loving. And on a quiet evening under golden sunset skies, he sat on the porch with Lena beside him and Josh between them, all wrapped in one giant blanket. "You ever think life would end up like this?" Lena whispered. Eli smiled. "Nope, but I'm glad it did." She leaned on him. "I was lost, broken, angry, and then I got stuck in the rain, and you changed everything." Eli looked out at the trees. "Nah, you changed yourself. I just opened the door."